Welcome to the Sales Influence Podcast, where we talk about finding the why and how people buy. I'm your host, Victor Antonio. Thank you for joining me. Thank you for lending me your ears. The other day, I was listening to Malcolm Gladwell. If you don't know who Malcolm Gladwell is, you should look him up. He's written a couple of books, several books actually. Let me see, Blink, Tipping Point, but my favorite is Outliers. Now, Outliers is a book about why some people succeed and others don't. And in this one interview he was doing, he mentioned 4 different conditions, and this was a lecture he gave at Microsoft, if you want to look it up on YouTube, where he talks about the 4 different conditions that will determine our success or failure. Let me go through 4 of them, all 4, and then I want to focus in and hone in on one that pertains to you and me most likely. The first one is you come from an advantaged position, which eventually gives you an advantage, right? An advantage that are advantages, you call them. There's advantages that are advantages. For example, let's say you're born into a well-known family or a wealthy family, and as you progress through your career, you use your family's connections to actually advance your career. That's advantages that are advantages. Condition number 2, there are advantages that are also disadvantages. For example, back to the same situation. You may come from a wealthy family, but because you come from a wealthy family, you feel privileged and you don't work as hard. So those advantages become a disadvantage because you really don't learn how to grind, if you know what I mean. So that would be the second condition. The third condition, which is obvious to a lot of people, is that you're born with disadvantages, which also lead to a life of disadvantage. Let's say you come from a broken home, single parent, poverty is all you know, or drugs, addiction, whatever it may be. You were born into that disadvantage, and the rest of your life, you're going to be at a disadvantage. That's the third condition. Now, the fourth condition caught my attention. That is, you have disadvantages, but you utilize or turn those disadvantages into advantages. And the example he gives is, he highlights that 30% of entrepreneurs have been diagnosed with some type of learning disability. That would be a disadvantage. But yet, these entrepreneurs like Richard Branson and people of that ilk are very famous, popular, and successful. Question is why? How did they turn a disadvantage into an advantage? Well, Gladwell highlights this one on being dyslexic, for example. And he says, well, think about it. If you're dyslexic, first of all, you have to learn new coping skills. And that is, you have to learn maybe how to learn differently. You maybe learn how to delegate, responsibilities. Maybe you learn how to look at things different. Maybe you have to become a better communicator because you're not a great reader or a writer, but you can become a great communicator. Because you have dyslexia, you also learn how to solve problems. So you become a problem solver in your life, right? So you also, because you delegate things, maybe you have to manage more things. In other words, being dyslexic has disadvantages, but it also allows you to develop other skill sets, like you learn to delegate. You look for ways to kind of cope with what's going on. You become a better communicator. You become a better problem solver. And in this essence, you become a better leader. And that's why disadvantages in the long run can become advantages. Now, how does this apply to you? Let's say you have certain disadvantages in selling. Well, maybe we can figure out a way to turn those disadvantages into advantages. Maybe you can learn how to deal with them differently, find a way to solve them, in other words, find a way around that solution and develop other skills that maybe you'll be better at developing. For example, let's say you're not a great communicator. That's one of the things you struggle with. I'm really nervous. I can't communicate. Well, maybe people don't want a great communicator. Maybe they want a problem solver. Maybe you're even better at that. In other words, maybe you can't get in front of people and make a presentation or do a presentation, but maybe you can sit down with people one-on-one and really walk them through the process of how you can solve problems. In other words, don't let your disadvantage remain a disadvantage. Take that disadvantage and turn it into an advantage. And keep the dyslexic example in mind, that once you learn how to go around your disadvantage, you'll become that much more successful. I highly suggest the lecture. Again, it was the lecture at Microsoft. I think if you type in Microsoft, Malcolm Gladwell, you'll listen to the lecture. And I'm telling you, it's worth every minute. And that is it for this Sales Influence podcast. This one was a little different. Wanted to give you a twist on how we can view our ability to sell as an advantage. Even if you think it is a disadvantage, it is an advantage if you can flip it and turn it into your direction, in other words, how you sell more effectively. And again, check me out on Spotify, iTunes, Pandora, wherever you're listening to me. Love to get your feedback on what you think of this topic. This, to me, is near and dear because I know a lot of people who are struggling with disadvantages, but I also know people who've turned those disadvantages into advantages. Leave me some feedback again, iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, Pandora, YouTube, wherever you find me. And also, if you haven't done so already, check out the Sales Velocity Academy. If you need to level up your skills, you want to sell more faster, go to salesvelocityacademy.com. This is Victor Antonio, always reminding you that selling ain't hard when you know how. Take care. Hi, I'm Victor Antonio. I'm an author, sales trainer, and keynote speaker. I'm often asked, what makes a great speaker? Is it someone who delivers real content that the audience can use? Is it someone who engages the audience so they're part of the learning experience? Or is it someone who can motivate an audience to push them beyond their comfort zone and discover new abilities? The answer is yes. But the most important thing to remember is that I'm not there to look good. I'm there to make my client look good. Simply put, it's never about me, and it's always about them.